Hello, I'm Will Mountford. Welcome to ResearchPod. Changing political tides across the globe are inextricably linked to the use of social media and internet-based messaging. From fringe forum theories giving rise to the QAnon conspiracy, to WhatsApp rumors fueling mob violence at lightning speed. But those whisper networks are, by their very nature, built on inference and suggestion, and surely something like a photo of your lunch on a sunny day can't be part of the same psychological spin machine. Right? Today we're joined by Dr. Sarah Garcia Santamaria from the University of Bristol, whose research into social media content takes the notion of subscribing to a political feed to a new dimension. And joining me from the University of Bristol is Dr. Sarah Garcia Santamaria. Hello there.
Hello, Will. How are you doing?
I'm very well, enjoying the spring sun, and how are you?
I'm fine. I'm ready to talk about populism on a plate.
Yes, it's something which I regret how timely it is. It is
hmm
a shame that it has come around to such severity again, but this is the world we are in. So, to set some of the stage about the world we are in and your research, could you tell me a bit about you as a person? What led you to researching populism, social media? Why this out of anything in the world to think about?
Well, like a lot of things, it was a pandemic. I had no teaching during the pandemic and I had loads of free time. And I started following populist leaders from all over the world on Instagram. And, at that time, politicians were at home. We were at home and they were at home as well. And they were showing us interesting glimpses about their daily lives, their homes, their hobbies, and also what they cooked. And I started realizing a lot of them across the ideological spectrum were posting about food, what they cooked that day. They were even sharing family recipes or teaching you how to make a cocktail. And I thought, well, that makes sense. Food porn is very popular. It is definitely engaging, but I wanted to understand it better. Why are they posting about food? What is it that is so interesting about it? And I guess I made an effort to contextualize that and give it an analytical framework.
And before we go any further, it's worth, I think, setting some terms, make sure that everyone's on board when we talk about things like far-right populism, social media. What are the networks you're looking at, and how would you define populism for the sake of your research and this conversation?
Well, we live in an era of a populist hype. It looks like every politician we dislike is a populist, but not all far right leaders are populists. And we also have different types of populism. We have far left populism, we have far right populism. So I just want to make sure that you understand that I'm talking about far right populism. Why am I focusing on far right populism? Because it seems like it is the far right that is mobilizing food as a cultural anchor in its cultural wars. It's not something the left has really picked up on yet. So there is not much interesting, I could say, from the left. When we talk about populism, we immediately think about two things: people centrism and anti elitism. As Ernesto Laclau put it many years ago, populism is about the people versus power contradiction. So when we think of a politician as being populist, we think, okay, this politician is against the political class, against the status quo, and it's siding with the people. It is siding with the people discursively, but also performatively. And what do I mean by that? I follow what we call the social cultural approach to populism. That's been studied by Ostigui, Moffitt, Panizza, and other scholars. So, according to that point of view, populism is also a way of relating to the people, how a leader relates to the people. And it's also a way of being and acting in politics. How am I presenting myself in front of the people? Who am I siding with? So, from the point of view, if you're siding with the people, if you're presenting yourself as an ordinary person, not as a politician, but as a political outsider who has the same taste, the same routines, the same lifestyle as ordinary people, the common people, then you are presenting yourself performatively as a populist.
And in terms of the social media networks used, it's an ever-changing landscape in terms of which ones are in favor or not. If we're recording this 10 years ago, it'd probably be a very different conversation about Facebook. 20 years ago, we'd be talking about MySpace. 2 years ago, probably talking about Twitter in a very different context. So, what was the scope, the bounds that you put on the platforms you were looking at? And even if it's just anecdotally, do you feel like different ones have different vibes? Because I'm guessing Trump's Truth social media network is very different to something like Blue Sky.
Of course. So I wanted to look at social networks that used images and short videos because I was interested in doing a visual analysis. So I started looking at Instagram, and most of my work has been conducted about Instagram posts. But recently we have TikTok. And I also wanted to see if politicians were performing the same way on TikTok. And I'm just starting to look into it. But it looks like they still post about food on Instagram and TikTok. They just do it, I guess, in different ways. So on TikTok, you have many more videos of like politicians talking to citizens as if they were their friends, I guess, while on Instagram, you still more still images.
Food, it's a common social factor. Everyone listening to this eats. But in terms of how it is within a society, how does food reflect not just personal values like, vegan versus a hyper carnivore diet or traditional grub or takeaway food that is going to be a part of every diet in the world? I don't know if there's a country that doesn't have a Pizza Hut. So, what is in some of your research constructed as our food versus their food?
Well, thanks for asking me that. I actually look at food as a cultural anchor, and that means that it helps us anchoring ourselves to specific identities, specific collective identities. I think there are very few cultural tropes. We have music, but very few cultural tropes really that are as entrenched with our identities and also capable of evoking such strong emotions as food. It really touches our gut feelings. We have this visceral connection with food, this passionate attachment to food. I mean, you put the wrong ingredient in a paella or a pasta carbonara, and a whole country gets really pissed off. Why do we get so angry about food? Another example, you talk about reducing meat intake. In the UK, for instance, there were this rumor that the Labour Party was going to introduce a meat tax. Or in the United States, also fake news about the Democrats cutting red meat intake by 90%, which meant you would only be allowed to eat one hamburger a month. And people get so angry. It's not just ideological, but this kind of affective polarization. Food is also very intersectional because it cuts across our community, the nation, ethnicity, religion, the gendering of food, social class, this battle between the local and the global production of food. And also, food debates, they also have real world consequences. I mean, they have consequences for your health, other people's health, the non human, the planet, and it even makes you wonder about anthropocentrism as a whole. It is very linked as well to debates on climate change. And you have like very specific ways of green patriotism, patriotic ecology, but also climate change denialism and denialism on the far right. So all these elements make food a very particular and very interesting cultural anchor. As an easy issue, it is an entry point to highly political debates. It feels easy to position yourself about food. Oh, I want to eat less meat. I want to eat more meat. But what you don't always realize is that this can be very political or very politicized, right? In a world that brings a lot of cultural anxieties and we have extremely threatened identities, what we look for in food, our food, is this sense of like our cultural roots, the safety of home, of your community, and the certainty that you know where you belong to. So it's very easy to mobilize food as a way of constructing our community versus foreign communities versus migrant communities in a way that strengthens kind of polarization and exclusionary populism.
In terms of some of the content covered in one of your research papers, it was a part about Nutella from Matteo Salvini, who is one of the political leaders in Italy. To me, Nutella is a bit of a luxury. It's a comfort food. Does the type of food and its place within that dynamic of having your daily staples, your rice, wheat, bread, pasta, porridge, versus an indulgence, does that affect the perception or the politicization of the food substance?
Well, everything is politicized. So we have very different discourses on the far right. There are different ways in which it politicizes food. So, for instance, Matteo Salvini, when he was Minister of Home Affairs and Prime Deputy Minister in Italy, he posted a lot. And when I mean a lot, it's really a lot. Like every other day, he was posting about food, what kind of food he ate. And he was posting, for instance, about Nutella. He even had a Nutella war. He loved Nutella, and one day he stopped eating it. And he said, well, I'm stopping because I realized that they use Turkish hazelnuts while they should use Italian ones. And then Nutella replied to him and they said, well, actually, in Italy, we don't produce enough hazelnuts for making Nutella and meeting world demands. It was like, okay,
I think Nutella consumes 90% of the world's hazelnuts. Ferrero, like the parent company.
incredible. Yes, Ferrero. So what was he doing? I mean, he was linking these comfort foods, also these very kind of like childish and primitive taste for sweets, right? Into something else, into a way of like excluding migrants and defending the Italy first produce, right? Italian farming and agriculture. That's one way in which they use it. But there are many other ways. He was also posting sometimes with orange trees or Italian vegetables. If you look at Nigel Farage, for instance, in the UK, he also posts about British strawberries. And the next day he's in a pub drinking a pint. So do you have this kind of like nationalism? What comes from my country and this kind of nativist approach to it? Do you have this idea of like I like comfort food, I like fast food, and I'm defying with that all health experts, I'm defying climate change. I'm when I'm eating McDonald's, for instance, we know Donald Trump loves McDonald's. What is he doing? I mean, he's defending macro farming. He's really disregarding any health advice about what kind of food you should eat. There is this kind of like this transgression, right? There is also this popular, ordinary side to it. I go to the pub and I drink a pint, or I could eat anything in the world because I have the money and I have access, but I choose to eat a hamburger. McDonald's is and hamburgers are kind of a symbol of like Americans working class. So I'm like you. I'm close to you. So you have all these different approaches there.
And then there was something, it's not something that I was aware of before coming to your research, but the Tuesday dates of Cast. His Tuesday dates series about bringing people not just to the pub or to a restaurant or to a vineyard, orchard, wherever, but bringing them into their house to be part of their meal. What does that do for the humanization of the people and their politics?
So when politicians are in social media, they are kind of giving you the idea that you have access to their intimate self. And this has to do with the personalization of politics and even more the intimization of politics. I want you to know me better, and I'm going to open the doors of my house. You're going to have access to very intimate spaces of my life. So we have an example in Chile, for instance, Jose Antonio Cast. He's the leader of the Chilean Republican Party. He didn't win the elections, but he came first in the first round of elections in 2021. So he might have a chance of winning in the next elections. So he has these Tuesday dates with his wife. He calls it Martes de Pololeo. So every Tuesday he meets with his wife. He saves some time for family values and they have dinner together along food. They might go to a very modest restaurant or just eat whatever at home. Very simple food, nothing extraordinary like pizza, taco, a salad. Sometimes he poses with some national foods such as mote con huesillos. But what he's doing is kind of like defending family values and religion and presenting himself as an ordinary man with an unsophisticated taste, right? It's very interesting.
And this is all then layered into how social media changes the dynamics with which people can interact with the politicians. That it's not just seeing them at their table, but you can talk to them at their table, that you see them at the pub, you can respond. It's not just beaming a message out, but there is dialogue and there is tone and character that goes into all of that. So, what does Instagram specifically, being more comments and responses than TikTok has the video responses and Twitter having huge chains of replies, how does social behavior through social media change the tenor of all of those posts?
Very often we see, oh wow, this post has so many comments and replies, and you start reading through them, and a lot of them are insults. So, for instance, do you remember when a woman threw a McDonald's milkshake to Nigel Farage in the lead of 2024 UK elections? That same day, he posted on his Instagram account a video holding McDonald's milkshake, and he said, "My milkshake brings all the people to the rally." And I went through some of the comments, and for instance, one of the comments was, "You belong to an episode of Come Dine with Me," kind of making fun of him. But other comments were like, "Oh, he's my guy. He's a normal, everyday person. I would love to have a pint with you, you know? You're funny, you love your country, and you enjoy a pint." That kind of reaction is also very common. I kind of identify with a guy who goes to McDonald's and likes to have a pint and is very ordinary and unsophisticated. And it's very approachable and relatable, right? Another example, Donald Trump during the electoral campaign, he was seen serving fries out of McDonald's to regular people. So Kamala Harris had said that she worked 1 month at McDonald's when she was at college just to pay for basic needs. And Trump was like, that's not true. She cannot co-op McDonald's. McDonald's is my thing. So he went to McDonald's, he served fries, and he said, I've officially worked longer at McDonald's than Kamala. And he posted that on TikTok. And he got over 5 million likes and 64,000 comments on that specific post. And some people were like, oh, that is the cutest thing ever. How can you not love this man? And another person was like, he's the realist. I love his sense of humor. And still another person was like, you cannot get more personable. So it is clear that they are trying to create this kind of like authentic, relatable, ordinary persona and connect with people, with their followers through cultural anchors, through food, through simple national food.
How does that then sit at odds with pictures of Donald Trump sitting in his solid gold office? Or Nigel Farage posting about his economic insights, having spent so long working in city finance. That's where he's made all of his money. Is this something that is addressed, of having these down-home food attitudes against also being fantastically wealthy?
As you said, it is more complicated than that because, I mean, their privilege means that they can perform as being part of the elite, but also as being political outsiders in the sense that they have an ordinary taste. So you can be both things at the same time, and your performances can oscillate between those two personalities. But for instance, Anthony Scaramucci, who was the former White House communication director, was asked by the BBC, tell me something about Donald Trump that is not elitist. And he said, well, you know, he eats cheeseburgers, he eats pizzas. And then you see Donald Trump on his private plane, along with Elon Musk, Donald Trump Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy, posing with McDonald's hamburger and a Coca-Cola. So there are so many contradictions in there because you are wealthy, you're surrounded by wealthy people, you are in a private plane, but still, you have this ordinary kind of character identity that doesn't change who you are. Money hasn't changed you in the sense that you still like McDonald's, you still like simple pleasures. You are still able to connect with the people in a way that other politicians can't.
You mentioned that a lot of the comments on some of these posts do carry negativity, that they might be insults. It is still interaction, it is still engagement, so I'm not going to get into the social media algorithm that is being gamed there. But are there ever comments, or does your research address any of the comments or conversations between commenters where someone might say an insult to a politician and then they get responses off of that, arguments or support from any which side?
To be fair, I mostly analyze how politicians use food in their social media performances, how they pose with food. And there are so many comments, there are literally thousands of comments that you would need, I guess, a bigger team to do that kind of work. It is something I'm very interested in doing, but I haven't really done a thorough piece of analysis.
It is a bit of a silly question, but is there a right-wing diet, or conversely, a left-wing one?
Well, two things. First of all, is there a far right diet or a populist far right diet? Well, it depends because it is very culturally rooted. So it depends on where you are. As you said, Matteo Salvini doesn't pose with the same type of food as Donald Trump or as Nigel Farage, right? They are different nations and different types of food. But what far right leaders pose with has to do with their cultural heritage, where they come from. So you can pose with pasta, you can pose with hamburgers, what you can pose with a pint, whatever really identifies the working class, the ordinary people in each nation, and that varies, right? There are common tropes. For instance, having a sweet tooth, liking Nutella or liking McDonald's chocolate milkshakes, that is kind of defying health regulations that try to get people to consume less sugar. You also have the defense of comfort food and of fast food. So really kind of eating that links yourself to your roots, to your nation, to your territory, but also to specific social class. And that also varies according to the country. But you have, I guess, those three elements, right? Nation, social class, and roots. You also asked me if there is a far left diet, right? And you were talking about vegetarian, vegan options, or cafes. Well, there is a very interesting example of Barack Obama, and there's a lot of written about him being too fit to be president or too feminine to be president. A lot of people saw Obama and his healthy eating habits as really a problem for his electoral campaign. They saw him kind of as too elitist, too detached from the common Americans. For instance, he was giving a rally in 2008 and he was like, oh, yes, arugula prices in Whole Foods are so high. And he was probably trying to get in touch with the common people, like it's expensive, but people were like, what is arugula? Who eats arugula? Who buys at Whole Foods? You're part of the elite and you're very detached from the common people. And his kind of chorus followed him throughout his electoral campaign. He also faced a broccoli chorus. There were rumors that Obama's Affordable Care Act was going to oblige Americans to buy broccoli. And I mean, who likes broccoli? But the idea was that he was going to oblige you to buy healthy foods and vegetables and to eat healthy because the healthier you eat, the less of a chance there is that you will become sick and it will be cheaper for the state. That got so big that district in Florida declared his Obamacare unconstitutional because you cannot oblige Americans to eat broccoli. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that only happens in America, but there is a lot of work that looks at vegan, vegetarian men as, or even climate change mitigation policies as emasculating or as feminine, while eating meat, eating a lot of protein, being a bodybuilder, right, is seen as masculine and giving you power and privilege. Well, there is a reason why Donald Trump is eating hamburgers and not kebabs. You know what I mean? The kind of fast food you choose to pose with tells a lot to the people you're talking to, with your community, right? So hamburgers represent ordinary Americans, right? It is not a multicultural food, it's not a foreign food, it is a very national food. I don't know, there's been works about these ideas of meat liberty in the United States or hot dog patriotism. So it also links with the gendering of food and how politicians often post with meat as a way of appearing more powerful and showing strength. Matteo Salvini, the same thing. He's posing with pasta dishes, with pizza, sometimes using the colors of the Italian flag, basil, tomatoes, and mozzarella. So you're representing your nation against other types of foods. In Germany, we have the radical right party AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, who had posters that read, I like Burgundy wine better, or Islam, it does not match our kitchen. Italians also did that. La Lega, which was Salvini's party, also had posters that read yes to polenta, no to couscous. I guess everybody also remembers the famous freedom fries instead of French fries. So all these are ways of naming my food as a way of representing my community against other communities, like against migrants, for instance, but also other communities in the sense of health experts, for instance, or environmentalists. I don't care about the environment. I'm a denialist, and therefore I like McDonald's. I support microfarming and all these things. I don't care about what health gurus say. I still order at McDonald's 2 Big Macs, 2 fillet of fish, and a chocolate milkshake, which is what allegedly Donald Trump orders every time. It's very interesting to see who is your enemy, right? Who are you defending yourself against? So you're defending yourself against cosmopolitan elites and intellectuals, progressive parties, international organizations, but also foreigners, immigrants, religious communities. And something very interesting is that you're kind of defending yourself against leftist, communist, Marxist killjoys. And here I want to use Sarah Ahmed's idea of the feminist killjoy. The idea that when you are consuming certain foods, you get this hedonistic pleasure that is linked to your roots, your memories, your community, to your nation, to your social class, whatever. And when you are telling people you should eat less sugar, you should eat less red meat, you should make an effort to be healthy and protect the environment, you are kind of attacking and killing their access to pleasure. They're a patriarchal, neoliberal, but also deeply entrenched access to pleasure. And when you mess with people's roots, when you mess with people's access to small daily pleasures, that's when you get them really angry, as we were saying, right? With paella, with pasta, with the wrong ingredients, and you'll start a war.
Crucially, I suppose, and this is something which, based on the tides of history, may have already been answered, but does this work? Does posing with these foods support the cause for getting these people more visibility, more influence, and more political power?
Well, in social sciences, it's really hard to draw direct correlations to say, oh, people vote for Trump because he's hamburgers, or people are now more likely to vote for Nigel Farage because he likes his pint at a pub. So there is no correlation, of course. But what's important is to see how political leaders mobilize cultural anchors such as music, it can be cinema, it can be food, it can be lifestyle, it can be fashion, how they mobilize different cultural anchors as part of identity politics and cultural wars, and how they are using these kind of easy, innocent, apolitical things as a way of leading very politicized debates, right? And kind of creating in-group and out-group communities. And does that work, right? Identity politics as a whole is working for them in a way. But yeah, we cannot say it's the only factor, of course, for that.
Well, it can't be the only factor because we're going to be speaking in another episode soon. For now, let's recap a little bit on what we've covered. What would you say is the 2-minute summary about everything that we've covered in the last 39 minutes?
Okay, so I look at how politicians post on social media with food. And that seems a little bit banal, why would you care about that, right? As I said, food is a cultural anchor. It means that it anchors you to a specific individual and community identity. Food is what gives sense to who you are, right? Where you're from, what you like, what your daily guilty pleasures are. Food, even if it looks like a banal issue, it is very political and it can be very politicized. It can be politicized in the sense of talking about vanishing traditions. So, how rapid cultural change creates a lot of cultural anxiety. And you look at whatever gives you rootedness, foods that give you rootedness, that make you feel safe, comfort food, fast food, whatever makes you feel comfortable and safe at home against, I don't know, multiculturalism, migration flows, the increase of food prices. So I would like academics to pay more attention to the role of performance and aesthetics when they analyze far right politics and populism. Because there are so many elements of pop culture, of lifestyle, of your everyday life that can be very easily politicized, and we haven't really paid much attention to them. There's a lot of work about music and populism because music, just as food, can very easily mobilize your gut feelings and your visceral emotions and makes you feel part of a specific community. But food has been mostly disregarded. There are some works on food nationalism, gastronationalism, gastronativism, but food populism is bigger than that. It's not just about your national roots, it's also about how you position yourself in terms of social class and also how you perform in an excessive and transgressive way that can defy what you would expect from a politician. Regarding policy makers, I think this is very important because, as I said, what politicians say and do about food, it affects everyone. It is extremely important for our health. It is extremely important for other people's health, for other people's rights, even, and identity, for how we treat animals, how we mitigate climate change. It has so many real world consequences that are overarching. And if a politician defends fast food or sugar, for instance, in Spain, I remember the far right saying, oh, those politicians, Podemos and PSOE, they want to legalize drugs and forbid sugar. That has a real consequence on how you farm animals, where you get your ingredients for, how are the transnational flows of food, what kind of diet people are going to have. This has so many implications. And finally, for the public, you can sympathize with a populist leader because you connect with them over the fact that you like having a pint or eating a hamburger. But hey, this is a strategy. This is not really who they are. And this is why we talk about performance. They are performing as being authentic, as being close to you, as being relatable. But it is part of a broader marketing and PR campaign that is meant to portray them as part of the people rather than part of the elite. But this is wrong. They are part of the elite. They are some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in your country. So, yes, pay attention to those apparently innocent cultural symbols that mean nothing because they can be very highly politicized.
And if people want to know more about your work, is there any webpage or paper that you would like to send them to?
I've written some papers and book chapters about food and populism. So I've written a paper called The Italian Taste, which is published by Tripodos, and it talks about Matteo Salvini. I wrote a chapter about posing with the people, the far right, and food populism. It is in a book called Food Instagram, edited by Emily Contois and Xenia Kish. And I'm currently writing a book chapter on Jose Antonio Cast, this Italian far right leader, and his Tuesday date with his wife. It will be published in the book Populism on the Streets, which is edited by Harry Brown and Maria Esperanza Gasuyu.
We can put links to those in the episode description so people can head right to those. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything that you'd like to add whilst we are still on the call?
So just two key messages. Food is political, so do vote with your fork.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you on our next episode soon.
Yes, same, Mike.